You're listening to Foxx on the Wire podcast.
All right. You ready?
I'm ready, mate.
Let's go. Okay. Ash Naylor, welcome to Foxx on the Wire.
Thanks for having me, mate. It's good to be here.
Absolutely stoked to get you on the show.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. It's nice to finally make it.
And welcome to the new podcasting room I've set up here / music room.
Mate, it's a dream. When do I move in is what I say.
Anytime you like. It's still a work in progress, but I think we're getting there, and hopefully it's going to inspire some good conversations.
Absolutely.
As we do more. So, how have you been?
Been good, thanks. Yeah,
Been good.
Just easing into, work life, whatever that definition entails. Yeah.
Yep. So last October you released a solo album called Soundtracks Volume 1. Will there be a Volume 2?
There will.
Yeah.
Thanks for noticing. Yeah, I snuck it out in October last year, I think on Hendrix's anniversary.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there will be. I just had to sort of scratch that itch, just get a whole bunch of stuff out into the open because it's been sitting at home for some of it for a couple of years, and other things were fresh from last year during the enforced layoff.
Yeah. So the songs you had on this album, were they sort of ones that you had almost lying around that you'd sort of written sort of over the years that you sort of never got around to recording?
Yeah.
Or were they all brand new songs that you wrote last year?
No, it's probably 70-30, 70% new, 30% old.
Yeah.
And then, as you can probably relate to, being a musician and a songwriter, some songs don't require vocals or melodies over the top. I find some pieces of music are just fine the way they are.
Yeah. Is that easy for you to make that decision? Like, does it sort of speak for itself as you're recording it or writing it?
Yeah.
And like, I don't need lyrics on this?
Yeah, sometimes I think the more I play, I'm not sure if you can relate to this, but the more I play, the more satisfaction I get out of just creating a piece of music. I don't know if you have this issue, but when I put vocals on things, sometimes I feel like I'm not diluting the process. Sometimes you're enhancing a piece of music with lyrics and melodies, but sometimes I feel like it distracts me sometimes as a listener from a particular piece of music. So the pure indulgence of doing an instrumental record, it was just so liberating just having a bunch of songs that essentially cost nothing to record and putting them out into the open for not any major sort of narcissistic kind of motive to have praise heaped upon me or anything. It was more like, you have music, you want to get it out. And I think the nature of the songs, I felt like they were worthy of being aired. I mean, because what makes something worthy, I think once you record something you like, just put it out.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of pieces of music that you might write, even if it's not a full song, that never actually make it to the recording process. They sort of just end up on a voice recording on your phone or in a notebook and never sort of go any further than that, I guess.
That's right. And one of the songs on that soundtracks is a voice the song called Indian Bells. It's an acoustic riff I did on the phone. And probably like yourself, I got a library full of tunes on the phone, and I actually wrote them down a few months ago. I got a pen out, pen and paper, and went through all my phone ideas. I was like, hang on a sec, there's 35, half-baked ideas here. So some of them do have another life. I guess I treat the phone like I used to treat a dictaphone or a Walkman back in the day. But sometimes I don't have the time or energy to review things and pick through them.
Yeah. Some stage.
Yeah.
But you got to document it somewhere. I'm easily forgetful, even if it's the next morning and I'm like, oh, what did I write last night? I'll forget. So I've got to record it, otherwise I forget.
Well, I think Keith had the same thing with Satisfaction. Wasn't it a bedside table? He had a tape recorder on the bedside table.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the kind of riff you want to get down.
Yeah, yeah. Lucky he did that.
Yeah, I think we're all benefiting from that. But there's a couple of ways of looking at it. If a song's worthy enough, you'll remember it. I think the Beatles had that philosophy that if it was good, John and Paul would remember the song the next day, you know, if they thought it was worthy of remembering. Yeah, look, it's almost like a clearing of the decks as well, like having all this stuff that I've amassed all this material during, as I said before, that enforced layoff last year. It's put me into a different mode. I was back into recording mode and just writing tunes all the time, and I can write tunes till my head explodes, you know. Yeah. Writing songs is the hard part. Writing tunes is easy for me. So
do you sort of not struggle more, but like find it a bit harder to write lyrics than music?
I do. It takes longer for me, and at the moment I'm trying to be a bit freer with myself about it, and not force myself to write lyrics. I mean, the last album I even did, I had some songs I'd written the lyrics for 3 times before I settled on a set of lyrics that were acceptable to me. Yeah,
I think the longer you go along, you know, the more years you're writing songs, the harder it is to settle on lyrics that you write. I'm finding that now.
Yeah.
I'm a bit more aware of that they're going to end up on a recording and people might actually be listening to what I'm sort of singing, so I'm a little bit more self-conscious these days.
It's good to try and balance being self-conscious with also being free within yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you agonise, I think, too much over certain aspects of the process, that might sound agonised, you know?
Yeah.
If that you know what I mean? Like lyric writing is difficult. I don't have a high opinion of myself as a lyricist, but I like lyrics to fit within a piece of music. I don't necessarily feel like, say with Even, I don't feel like the band's music is a launch pad for my lyrics and melodies. I feel like the lyrics and melodies are part of the whole picture. So I'm not motivated by writing lyrics and vocal melodies. I find it's just a part of what I do when I'm making a song. But I can relate to the idea of, you know, being not fussy, but particular about how you phrase something or what you're saying, or how overt you want to be about something, or how guarded you want to be about something, you know?
Yeah, because, I mean, they are pretty revealing. You know, writing lyrics is pretty revealing, but, I find it almost frustrating at times trying to make yourself sort of feel okay with them.
Yeah.
You get sick of it. By the time you finish it, you're kind of almost sick of it and sick of the process of... So, yes, I guess it's that fine line of trying to not force it, but somehow you still got to, you know, work your way through the process and be happy with the end result without being frustrated by it.
And also, I think in music, I'm not sure what your own expectations are of your own material, but my expectations of my own lyrics aren't unrealistic. I think I have an idea of what I'm capable of, but you know, I'm not trying to beat someone else at their game. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I'm just trying to refine my approach, and I think that's probably the thing that I'm trying to do in this phase of, you know, songwriting, is to it's like distilling it down to what I think is good music. I'm not trying to have some kind of pretentious aspiration of being a great lyricist or a great storyteller. You know, I'll leave that to the experts.
Yeah, you just do your own thing.
Yeah, and I think everyone, if they just do their thing, everything else kind of falls into place. I think Ray Davies said, if you write with honesty, if you write sincerely and with honesty, the end product will be good.
Yeah, and I think that will last longer, like as in terms of a career, which is probably why you've had such a long and successful career, is because you've done your own thing. You haven't tried to, you know, maybe match someone else or keep up with someone else or trends or anything like that. You're just kind of doing your own thing.
Yeah, I mean, it has its pitfalls as well, but Yeah, well, I think that's the key. Like, look at Anton Newcombe from the Brian Jonestown Massacre. Like, he is essentially an industry of one. You know, or Kevin Parker from Tame Impala, or PJ Harvey, or someone who's got this idea of what they want to do, and they do it, and they're unflinching. They don't bow to the industry, and I think that's, you know, I've had my moments in the past where I've been seduced by the industry and the expectations placed upon myself or the band that I'm in at the time when we were creating a bit of a buzz in the late 90s. You get a little bit intoxicated by that, and you sort of perhaps momentarily forget why you're making music. Whereas now at this point in time, I feel like the making of the music is its own reward.
Yeah.
But I've also been lucky to have played in some very well established bands like Paul Kelly Band and Rock Wiz and the Stems and that kind of thing, which has afforded me the luxury of having a musical lifestyle, but also having time away to do my own stuff.
Yeah, flipping between different projects and keeping everything fresh, I guess. Yeah.
And learning by osmosis. Like, I've learned a lot playing in Paul's band. I've learned a lot about an optimum environment for a band to make its best music, to make its best music within.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I'm 51 now, and I still feel as excited about making music as I did when I was 25.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is, I mean, your audience has shrunk, but the passion is still there, you know?
I guess COVID, the lockdown time aside, are you sort of busier than you have been in any other point in your career? Like going between all these different projects?
Yeah, prior to 2020, I was probably at a peak busyness.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it might have just been instilled in me as a kid to not be afraid of working.
Yeah.
Although it's a little bit of a conundrum because I don't always equate being a musician with working, because it's a different kind of headspace, like compared to doing a job you don't like. The work element comes in with being prepared for each gig that you take on. You've got to make sure that you're mentally and physically prepared for what the gig requires. So short answer is, I think up until 2020 I was as busy as I've ever been, but probably more mentally equipped now to deal with that busyness.
Okay, yeah. So going back to your Soundtracks Volume 1 album, did you record that at home?
Yeah, everything except for one track was recorded at home. The opening track was done at a friend's studio in London.
Oh, right.
On a day off in 2014. I was over there for a week or so. And we just went in one night and I did the whole Lenny Kravitz thing, just whacked down the drums, bass, guitar, and pretended I was in Crosby, Stills and Nash for a few minutes. Pretended I was Stephen Stills for 5 or 6 minutes. And then the rest of the stuff I did at home, very rudimentary recording. Like, I'm not hi-fi, I'm not a high-tech recording engineer. I just, if it's a clean signal, it doesn't distort, then I'm happy.
Yeah.
So everything on there, with the exclusion of a couple of drum loops which were recorded years ago, actually, there's a couple of Matt Cotter drum loops, Matt from Even. There's a couple of drum loops I found off a session we did, I think in 2011. Oh, yeah. And I sought Matt's approval before I...
Of course.
Yeah, I said, Matt, are you okay if I use this? Because, Matt is such a great drummer. He's just, 8 bars of Matt Cotter is like gold,
Yeah.
So there's a song, the second track, I think it's Free the Air. That's Matt on a drum loop. I was secretly hoping he would approve of me using it.
Yeah.
And there's another song down the end, Festival Jam, which is just Matt just playing to a track we did around the same period, and I just put a new guitar on there and some bass, and so sorry, I've gone off the track. Yeah. It was all recorded at home. Everything I did except the opening track was done at home.
So the opening track was Weeping Johnny.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you about the wah sound you've got on that.
Okay.
I guess it sounded very much like a Hendrix sort of wah sound.
Yeah.
But did it change through the song? Like at the start of the song, I really picked up on it, but then I'm like, more I listen to it, I'm like, oh, it's a bit sort of Jimmy Page too, maybe. Or
well, those two are my beacons. Like Hendrix and Page for me, when it comes to wah, are the absolute apex of that style of music. And I used whatever was at my disposal. I'm sure it was I think it was a Jim Dunlop Crybaby.
Yeah.
Don't think it was a Vox wah, but I guess doing instrumental stuff and doing. There you go.
When I listen to it, I'm like, oh, should pull out the old Jimi Hendrix wah. I think I got this when I was like maybe 12 for like Christmas.
Man, what a great present! I remember when I first tried a wah, it was like your world suddenly goes from black and white into Technicolor.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it.
I don't think, apart from Hendrix and Jimmy Page, I don't think I've had any other major influences with regards to why I would ever pick up a wah pedal. But those two guitar players pretty much were the soundtrack of my teenagehood. Yeah. Yeah, so I think it was probably one of these guys, like a Dunlop or a Crybaby kind of.
Yeah.
But I getting back to the instrumental thing, the freedom that I just love the freedom of making instrumental music. You know, like I didn't feel like any. I mean, that could have turned into a song, but it's almost sometimes like it's like you're shoehorning something that doesn't fit on occasions. You know, trying to squeeze these lyrics into a piece of music, it just doesn't. Sometimes it just doesn't fly.
And it probably gave you more freedom with the music, that you didn't have to try and, fit vocals around it, or vice versa.
Absolutely.
There was another track, Handgun Blues, which is basically a 7.5 minute guitar solo with no backing music or anything.
No, that I was listening to so much Hendrix during that period of time. For me, listening to Hendrix during 2020 was like just having musical medicine. Like, you might recall my 50th in March last year, 2020.
Yep.
All right, a mate of mine, Pat, gave me a box set of the Fillmore concerts, 69/70, of Band of Gypsies.
All right.
So all 5, I think it's 5 shows over 3 days or 2 days? 3 days. So all the shows that he did that weekend are now on a box set. Wow. So I had a pretty intense Band of Gypsies listening party with myself.
Yeah.
And it really came out in things like Handgun Blues, because Handgun Blues, like you said, it's essentially a 7 or 8 minute guitar solo, but it has form. To me, it has form. Not, kind of a loose structure. But it also tests the patience of anyone who might be listening to it, because it's the kind of thing you could have 30 seconds of it and you get the gist of it, or 8 minutes of and you get the gist of it. But that's the beauty and freedom of making instrumental music. Isn't just no limits.
Yeah.
And another influence for that one was Maggot Brain by Funkadelic.
Oh, yeah.
Which is an opening track on their album of the same title. And Eddie Hazel essentially plays a guitar solo for the whole song.
Yeah.
So there's a light rhythm holding it together, and then Eddie Hazel's playing Hendrix style lead over this whole track. And if anyone who tunes into your podcast is curious at all, I think for me Eddie Hazel was kind of like the successor to Hendrix, because the early Funkadelic and Parliament records with him playing lead on it are just absolutely mind blowing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, he's the guitar playing on Standing on the Verge of Getting It On by Funkadelic is up there for me with some of the best electric guitar ever recorded.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll check that out.
And I'm a fussy old fuss pot.
Yeah. Is it crazy to you that Hendrix did so much and he was only 27 when he died? Like, there's a few people like that, obviously, in the 27 Club, and even Tupac in the and the rap thing, he was like 25, I think.
Yeah, it's insane, isn't it?
And they just did so much up until that point that's still lasting through these generations. That just blows me away, I guess.
It does blow me away. And
yeah.
In my 20s, I used to be very hung up on my my age. I used to sort of think, oh, I'm too old. There's no way I could possibly write a good song. I'm 26 or 27, you know.
Yeah.
And to think that Hendrix had done everything that he did up until that point, and you know, who knows what could have come after. But well, you know, on a similar note, look at Steve Merritt from Small Faces. He left the Small Faces when he was 21, so he'd already been in the Small Faces for you know since 1965.
Yeah.
And by 1969, that's it. You know, I'm going to form another band with Peter Frampton. I'll form Humble Pie. A bit like Paul Weller from Style Council. Like when he left Style Council, I think when he left the Jam, when he split his band up at the peak of its success, he was like 23 or something.
Right.
Yeah, it does astound me that people like Jimi Hendrix can do what they do, being so young. But you know, you don't need me to tell anyone how much of an anomaly he is in every aspect, and just a once in a generation musician.
Yeah, and he still rates, you know, in all the guitar world polls and top guitarists of all time, still number one, and you know that will probably never change. Yeah,
well, I mean, you know, you can't. How can you dispute it? I mean, it's not to everyone's taste.
Yeah,
but as a budding guitarist myself. Every time you pick up a guitar, you think, how can I make it sound better? And, you know, Hendrix had the finesse, but he also had this wild, raw side, which is as much a part of his thing as his finesse and skill. Yeah. You know, like he was a very skilled guitarist. Yeah. But he also had this sense of abandon, which... you can't force that, you know?
Did he make you want to play left-handed?
No, he just made me want to play better.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I obviously grew up with Nirvana, and there was a point there when I was sort of first starting to learn guitar. You know, I'd sort of learnt the basics, and I really wanted to play left-handed. So I tried that. I figured, you know, I've learnt the technique on this side. Maybe I can just switch it over and do it.
How'd you go?
No, I'm not real good. Yeah. So I'm still a right-handed guitarist, but that's fine.
No shame in that. But yeah, Kurt, well, there you go. Like he's another brilliant guitar player for different reasons. Yeah. You know, like how could you think of a chord progression like Lithium or something? Like who thinks of that? You know what I mean? Like no one. He's another one. Once in a generation kind of artist, you know?
And it's pure art, really, isn't it? It's not just songwriting, and it's more art. Like what he could do with the things that he was writing and the way he painted his lyrics and his performances. Not anyone can just do that.
No, well, he's another anomaly, you know, for a multitude of reasons. And you know, I was and am a massive Nirvana fan. Like, you know, I actually saw them when they came out, and it's like, you know, it was just beautiful. Yeah. You know, like it was powerful and it was exciting, and you could sense, you know, you can feel the change, you know, you can feel the change in everything. Like coming out of the 80s into the 90s, you know, it was I guess it was probably a gradual transition to a certain extent culturally, but Nirvana they fast-tracked this change. Okay, well, I think it gave people a lot of freedom, right, just to be themselves. Yeah. You know, you see a guy up there with Converse and a cardigan with a Fender Mustang screaming at the top of his lungs, but making this beautiful racket. It was very liberating.
In a small or relatively small place?
Yeah, I saw him at the Palace. Yeah.
Palace. So what year was that? Was that 91?
92.
Yeah. So did you feel that sort of shift in music as it was happening? Like from, well, I guess to keep it simple, from the 80s sort of glam thing to the grunge sort of movement? Did you feel that as it was happening?
Yeah.
Because you lived right through it.
Absolutely. I had a bit of a concurrent experience though, because the band that I was in the 80s, The Swarm, was a very English-influenced band and very influenced by the Smiths and the Cure and Susie and the Banshees and Joy Division.
Yeah.
So the glam rock thing, it was running parallel to what I was into, and I was into the Stone Roses, and when other mates of mine were into Mudhoney and that kind of stuff, I was into the Roses, and they sort of managed to transition through the late 80s, early 90s relatively unscathed, apart from the fact they split in 96 for the first time. But Nirvana just changed. It's hard to sort of overstate the impact they had, really.
Not to take any credit away from them, obviously, because they're one of my favourite bands, but did they get too much credit for that whole change? Like, obviously it wasn't just them.
No, you're right. There was a bunch of bands.
Yeah, or is it more that other bands maybe don't get enough credit, like Soundgarden, Alice in Chains?
Well, I think those bands you mentioned got recognition for their artistry, you know. But I think given that Nirvana was such a freakish anomaly, I don't think in any of the attention or credit Nirvana got was. I don't think it was over the top. I think it was justified, you know. Cause, I mean, from a songwriting perspective, no one before or since has written songs like Kurt Cobain. I mean, he openly confessed to being a massive Pixies fan, which is pretty obvious in some ways, but you could go so far as to say that Frank Black, no one could write songs like that guy. Not to diminish the songwriting of, you know, Lane Staley and Chris Cornell and their bandmates, you know, Jerry Cantrell and those guys who are really very talented songwriters in their own right. But I think there was just something so different about Nirvana. Although they're a heavy rock band, they were quite different. Yeah. You know, they did stick out from that mob.
So it really was that sort of special at that, or they were that special at that time. You really noticed it. Yeah,
because they were more than just they weren't even a grunge band, you know. That tag doesn't even apply to them. They're just to me, they're just like a classic rock band with so many different elements, like that. You know, they had like a punk element, a kind of hard rock element, but also a pop element as well.
Oh, big time, yeah.
You know, and you put all those together in that sort of magical mix of what they had. And the thing is, it's like talking about the Beatles. It's been, you know, it's been overstated and talked about so much. But having seen them live and buying their records when they came out, it was exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, I always like to talk to people who lived through it and noticed it at the time, because I was only about 8 or 9, sort of in the early 90s, so I wasn't into it at the time. It was more sort of just after Kurt died, I think, that I got into it. So I was looking back and I was reading back, and it was always, you know, but I always like to talk to people who actually lived through it and noticed it at the time, to get like a proper perspective. So,
well, it's interesting. It's like it reset me, because I grew up on 70s rock, the Kiss and Sweet, Skyhooks and ABBA and that kind of stuff. Yeah. Then I got into my whole 80s trip, but the Nirvana thing kind of was like a reset. And I bought my first Marshall, I think, in 93 from Troy Music down in Ringwood or something. Oh, yeah. It's like, it's okay to play rock and roll again. You know what I mean? And You Am I was a band that had that same impact on me as a young person into rock and roll. Yeah. You know, Marshall stack. It's okay to have a Marshall stack, you know.
Yeah, well, Nirvana definitely got me going, and Silverchair, because that was around the time Silverchair was getting started. That's when I started learning guitar. So it's probably those two bands for me, and Guns N' Roses on a different sort of level with, you know, Slash and his guitar skills. So and they're still having impacts, you know, all these years later.
Well, that's the beauty of great music. It's you know, it's eternal. And each of those acts you've mentioned have all made something in their collection of works that will be considered timeless, you know. Yeah. that's the quest, is to make music that's timeless, you know, whatever it is you're making, you know. But getting back to the Nirvana thing, yeah, it was. I think it turned us all into grunge bands for a little while. Like when our band first started, we had a bit more of a heavier sound, and I was using a Gibson, and I think it just it made it a bit easier if you weren't a virtuoso musician. It made it more acceptable for you to just do what you do.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that other bands didn't give you license to do that. Other bands in the 80s like Husker Du and Fugazi and Dead Kennedys, other bands had paved the way, and Jane's Addiction, those kind of bands had paved the way for individualism within an alternative music scene that sort of became mainstream.
Yeah.
Let's also remember that at that point in time there was a real indie major kind of contrast, you know, like not many bands, I think, prior to Husker Du and Jane's Addiction were signing to Warner's, you know, and then when Nirvana signed to Geffen, it was like, okay, they're going into the big wide world, you know, because they were on Sub Pop, and it's like Sub Pop had this kind of a cultish sort of cottage industry thing, and Geffen kind of took it with him and took it to the world. But the power of Nirvana's music, you could sort of say that it was almost inevitable that being so good that the world needed to hear it.
There was such a big jump from Bleach in 89 to Nevermind in 91, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Two very different. Yeah. Like that was almost sort of metal in, you know, had a metal undertone, Bleach. And then, I mean, you could hear the songwriting skills in it still, and then you hear Nevermind, and that was only like 2 years, you know, and then just a massive jump, I guess.
And and also the different hoops bands jump through when they get signed. I mean, I think I read a quote from Kurt saying that the album sounded like Motley Crue or something when he first heard Nevermind. It was so slick, you know. But, you know, we love it. As music fans, we love those records for what they are. We don't think of what they could have been. Yeah. Only the artist has that luxury of thinking, well, it's not as raw or it's not as dirty as I would have liked, and therefore they get Steve Albini to make the next record. So
which was killer.
Yeah.
Oh. But, you know, you needed an album like Nevermind, which is pretty slick, to then appreciate an album like In Utero, I think.
And when we say slick, I guess we say it within the context of rock music. Like the production on Nevermind is just jaw-dropping. Yeah. You know, like the Butch Vig production, but the Andy Wallace mix, it's just unparalleled, you know.
Well, they said, you know, one of the many documentaries that's sort of floating around, that I think Butch Vig did a mix of Teen Spirit, and if they'd have released that, it wouldn't have been, you know, as popular as it was with the Andy Wallace mix. Yeah. But it wasn't huge. Well, maybe I should go back and listen before I comment, but I don't think it was a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's all speculative. Yeah. It's like when Paul remixed the Let It Be sessions for the Naked, Let It Be Naked, the Beatles thing, sort of rewriting history, you know, like sometimes you just accept a record at face value, and I don't often dig too deep and think of what ifs, like if Nirvana had been mixed by someone, you know, if Nevermind had been mixed by someone else, or it's just one of those things. It's just a great moment in time, you know. Yeah, it was just a once in a lifetime record, you know.
And it kind of, would you say it sort of set the rest of the 90s in motion for the music scene, basically?
Well, it did to a great extent. It set a precedent, I guess, and a lot of bands felt they had to match it sonically. And I'm not saying that our band were exempt from it as well. We started in 94, and me having come out of the sort of the cleaner pop world of the Smiths and R.E.M. and that more jangly kind of stuff. I think some of the early Even stuff paid tribute to that sound in a different, in a small way, you know, like we're essentially like a pop rock band. Yeah. But I think It's almost like when the dust settles, the bands that survived the 90s sort of turn into the bands that they probably were always going to turn into, you know, when the distortion sort of toned down a bit.
Yeah. And then you had the new metal towards the end of the 90s and 2000s. That was another sort of change.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And you know, that was a scene that I couldn't embrace because I was heading down a different musical path. You know, I was heading down the more sort of Beatlesque, Kinksy kind of, almost pastoral kind of. I couldn't really relate to new metal. I could understand its attraction and the power of it, but looking back on new metal, I can't really think of a song from that era that I would think is a great sort of classic song. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's purely subjective. Like it's not my cup of tea, but I felt like in the late 90s our band were fighting against that kind of genre.
Yeah.